2 weeks ago, we started a new series called Elements. And elements is the term that we use here at Cornerstone to describe the building blocks that inform all of our values and our strategy. Here are the 9 elements on the screen: community, confluence, generations, transformation, encounter, creativity, generosity, culture, and vocation. And this is who we are. This is what we do here at Cornerstone. We believe that combining these elements together creates a very potent formula for generating a vibrant and meaningful faith community. In the previous 2 weeks, Brian masterfully laid out a foundation for this series. He described what a covenant relationship looks like. We are at our core a community, a faith community built upon a powerful bonded relationship. And our highest value is to work these elements both individually and as a community. And the goal of this series is to address what that looks like to do this, okay? So we're throwing out a challenge during this series to consider embracing a higher calling for why we are here on earth. Just think about that for a moment. We're challenging everybody to think, what is the main purpose that I'm here for, and what is this higher call? How can we kind of live a bigger and more meaningful life than the one we might already be currently living? And we're going to begin doing this today by looking at the element where most of us spend the majority of our time and energy every week, our vocation. How appropriate that we start this on Labor Day weekend. Here's actually a description of Labor Day's purpose from the Department of Labor's website. It's kind of cool, actually. Labor Day is a creation of the labor movement and is dedicated to the social and economic achievements of American workers. It constitutes a yearly national tribute to the contributions workers have made to the strength, prosperity, and well-being of our country. I like that, okay? There are approximately, today, 150 million American men and women that make up our workforce, and this message is dedicated to all of us that are in that workforce. Here's a short video that we put together for this element topic.
When I was in high school, I went on a mission trip to Honduras where I spent the week playing with children in the mountains. And it was the most incredible thing I'd ever experienced. It melted my heart in ways that I didn't even know were possible. So when I was coming back to the States, I just kept thinking about how I could translate that into a career, because I knew that whatever that was what I wanted to give the best hours of my life to. So ever since then, I knew that vocation was going to be really important for me in how I built the kingdom and how I loved people really well. One of my favorite things about God is how he cares about absolutely every part of our life. There is no part that he does not want, and that includes our 9 to 5. So vocation to me is an opportunity to build the kingdom and to honor the Lord. I'm the network manager of the company I'm at. So whenever I'm meeting with people and showing them love in any sort of form, I feel vocation. And when I'm organizing our CRM or crunching numbers on a spreadsheet, that's more when I have to force it. But I know that that's equally as important to God, and I know that that's an important piece in me being able to approach vocation with the right heart. I think the biggest struggle that I've had with relation to vocation, and something that I'm still working through, is trusting God and not fearing. I think I have such an intense desire to create impact in the world, and I'm honestly a very career-oriented person, that for me, I have to practice giving it to God and trusting that he's going to use my life and my work to create as much impact as I dream about. When I'm approaching my work with an eternal perspective, I think the biggest difference is that I try and treat people like Jesus would. So sometimes that means deprioritizing the top of the to-do list items so I can take care of the people who are on my team and love them really well. I think vocation sometimes is our job description, but other than that, it's also just the way that we show up for the people who are around us. I'm Quinn, and this is what vocation means to me.
Quinn's part of this community. Thanks, Quinn, for doing that. I'm going to start today by giving some bad news. Can I get this half of the room to just stand up and stay standing for a second? Come on. You need the exercise anyways. So CNN Money reported just last Tuesday that approximately 54% of American workers are unhappy with their work situation. So if we include the entire room, I think I've got about 54% of you all are unhappy at work. I'm sad to say. So go ahead and sit down. And with 150 million Americans currently making up our workforce, that means 75 million Americans are unhappy at work. And that, to me, that's a very sad and unacceptable statistic. One day, 35 years ago, I left my house on my bike, lived in Irvine, California, to ride to a brand new job. On the way, I had to cross over California's famous Interstate 5, the 5 freeway. Anyone driven on the 5 freeway? Wonderful piece of concrete. And it was morning rush hour. And as usual, it was bumper to bumper. It was like a parking lot, a sea of brake lights. And so as I stopped on that overpass for just a moment to gaze at the how many cars there were and these brake lights, I suddenly began to just break down and weep like a baby. I mean, really just began to bawl. I'm glad I was the only one on that overpass at that moment. You see, the previous 12 years, I drove on that crowded Interstate 5 days out of the week, and it could take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours each way. To work, 2 hours, to back 2 hours, even longer. If you've lived in LA and driven on the freeways, and even a slight accident or rain can back this thing up. It can double your time. So at the minimum, that added up to about 13,000 hours of my life spent sitting on a piece of concrete. And to make things worse, I didn't like my job for a variety of reasons. It made me feel extremely unsatisfied and unhappy. And so as I stood there on that bridge that morning, I broke down thinking how I had wasted away all those years. But those tears were also mixed with incredible joy and thanksgiving over this new, more fulfilling job that allowed me to actually commute back and forth on my bike. How good was that? 54% of you in this room this morning are dissatisfied with your work situation. And since work is where the majority of us spend most of our time and energy, we're starting with the element of vocation to see if we can change that sad statistic. In the book of Ecclesiastes, the author, King Solomon, bemoans the futility of what he calls work performed under the sun, meaning the work that we do down here on earth. He says in chapter 2, verse 17, I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Now, think about this guy. Here's a guy that most people only dream about becoming. He had unimaginable wealth. He had unlimited power. He had universal fame. And yet none of those things satisfied this famous king. He was miserable. And the key to understanding the book of Ecclesiastes is to figure out the meaning of King Solomon's repeated phrase, under the sun. It doesn't just mean the work that we do here on earth. It means the work that we do here on earth that is disconnected from the work done in heaven. God's work is the work done above the sun, often called the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God in your Bibles. And for any work that's disconnected from God's work, Solomon says, meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. It's empty, it's unsatisfying. He's saying that if we don't have a higher calling, a higher purpose for our work, then ultimately that work is meaningless. And so to counter this meaningless work under the sun, he says in the next chapter, in chapter 3, verse 22, he says, so I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? And I believe the key to understanding this passage is to focus our attention on the Hebrew word chelek, that is translated lot in this sentence. In English, we have the phrase, this is our lot in life, right? You've probably heard that phrase before. And it means that this is our fate, or this is the hand we've been dealt with. And chelek has this fateful aspect to it. In other words, this is what God has given me, so I should just suck it up and enjoy it, right? But I believe in the context of this passage, chelek has a deeper meaning. Because even though it's often translated portion or lot or even inheritance, like this is the life I inherited from God, it also sometimes translated legacy, which the second sentence of the sentence seems to have in mind. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? Meaning we can't go back. We can't go back and see what kind of legacy we left behind. And so I don't believe Solomon is merely saying, this is the hand you've been dealt with, so deal with it. I believe he's saying, look, God has given all of us a limited number of days to live. We only get one shot at doing something significant with those days. We can't change them once they're gone. We can't come back to see what kind of legacy we left behind. So use your days wisely. Don't just live to build your kingdom. That's the kingdom under the sun. Live to build God's kingdom. That's the kingdom above the sun. And in doing this, you will not only find joy and purpose in life, you will leave behind a beautiful, common, good legacy. And I believe this is exactly what Rabbi Saul was saying in Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 and 24. And maybe hearing it framed this way, it'll give it some deeper context. He says, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, with all of your passion. Be 100% in, as working for the Lord, not for man, since you know that you will receive what? An inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is Messiah, Yeshua, you are serving. Saul's saying, consider every part of your life sacred. Everything, including your work. Nothing is secular. Everything is sacred. Don't just do the work under the sun. Do the work above it as well, because your real boss is Yeshua. Now, we chose the word vocation for this element instead of work because vocation literally means calling. It's a Latin word. It's why we call our men's ministry vocari. Vocari is just another form of this word. You see, work, listen to this. Work equates to what we do under the sun in order to survive. And this can lead to a meaningless existence because working merely to survive isn't always very joyful or meaningful. But vocation equates to what we do above the sun as part of a higher calling. It's more than merely surviving. It's participating with God for the common good. And this leads to an adventure-filled, purposeful, bold journey for all of us. A couple of weeks ago, I officiated a wedding up in Silverthorne on a most beautiful ranch. Most beautiful piece of property I've ever been on in my life. And I've been around the world. And prior to the wedding, I had a wonderful conversation with a Jewish relative of the groom. And like many Jews in the world today, this man deeply valued his Jewish heritage, but considered himself a secular humanist and not a religious person at all. During our conversation, he presented some well-thought-out arguments about why he avoids organized religion like the plague. And one argument he made was that all the wars and was about all the wars and violence that we see throughout history that were initiated in the name of a religion or a god. And I affirmed that he was correct about this sad reality. And so this Jewish man had a science background, and during our conversation, he presented the idea that, we're really no different than the animal world. And like animals, man's natural instinct is to survive, and survival is often the fuel behind wars and violence. And again, I totally agreed with him. I think he's spot on. You see, when God created the universe, he created all the living creatures, including mankind. And we're all not only working to find our next meal to survive, we're also working not to become someone else's next meal. And if you study biology, you'll discover that we're all basically constructed out of the same material, and we function similarly. We all need to refuel on a regular basis. Our plumbing operates pretty much the same way. What goes in must come out, and it must come in again, and it must come out, and on it goes. Every creature, including us, is trying to survive in that sense. And in that sense of survival, every living creature on earth works. Every living creature on earth has a job. And we can observe this universal survival workforce all over the planet. For instance, birds construct beautifully intricate nets to ensure the survival of their species. Spiders weave strong, silky nets to trap their next meal. Bees build geometrically perfect hexagonal honeycombs to store nourishment for their larvae. Beavers build dams to create a peaceful and secure habitat. And ants dig tunnels under the earth for the same reason. And what's really cool is that oftentimes as these living creatures are at work trying to survive, they inadvertently do something for the common good of humanity. For instance, while bees are collecting pollen to produce honey, they inadvertently spread the pollen which helps produce essential plant life. When beavers construct dams, they inadvertently create vital wetlands that provide a number of environmental benefits. And ant tunnels inadvertently provide a number of benefits for soil conditioning and plant life. If you're into gardening at all, you know ants are good for your garden. They're good for your soul. Soil. I just slipped right out there. Oh, Freudian slip. Ants are good for your soul. What'd you learn today at church? Ants are good for your soul. That's what you'll remember a week from now. But here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. Not one of these living creatures get up in the morning intending to do something for the common good. They are merely doing what's necessary in order to survive. There are no duck community activist groups, not a one. You will not find one famous guerrilla philanthropist anywhere or dogs running human shelters. It just doesn't exist. The animal kingdom lives to survive, end of story. Only humans are able to rise above merely working in order to survive and can work individually and together in community for the common good. And so while I was conversing with this Jewish man at the wedding, we talked about this reality. And I asked him if, as a scientist, do you see that this reality is simply a product of evolution? Or could it be that there's something divinely distinct about us, like how the Bible says that only humans are made in the image of God? And he nodded his head very affirmatively like this and said, wow, I think you raise a very good possibility. He was really fun to talk to. It was a delight. You know, we all have to work to survive. I mean, that's part of it, right? You got to put food on your table. And there's nothing we can do to change that reality. We are no different from the animal kingdom in that regard. But if we work only to survive, then we will most likely end up feeling dissatisfied in our work. And this partly explains why 50% of Americans feel like their work is not fulfilling. Only humans have the ability and the privilege of working above the sun to do something bigger and more significant with their lives. I mean, Jesus, it wasn't this kind of the essence of how he taught his disciples to pray? Our Father in heaven, sacred, hallowed is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Below the sun, as it is above the sun, on earth, as it is in heaven. And how is God's will done in heaven? I mean, I've said this so often, right? No one goes to bed hungry. or without a roof over their head. There's plenty of clean water for everyone. No one's ever mistreated or abused. No one's ever lonely or depressed. No one has to fight to survive, ever. Not even the animals, not even pesky mosquitoes. In Hebrew, we would say something like, Zehacho beseder behashamayim. It's all good. It's all good in heaven. So let's work to make it all good on earth as much as we can. And this is exactly what I believe King Solomon is saying in Ecclesiastes 3:25. There's nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their legacy. No one can bring you back to let you have a look at it. This is what you have right now to build. This is your portion. This is your lot. This is your inheritance. This is your legacy to leave behind. Okay, you with me so far? All right, we got more. I told you it's a mindful here. So what exactly does that kind of vocation look like for most of us? Think about it this way. When God created the universe, he created it from absolutely nothing. He had nothing to work with, right? Nothing existed. He had no raw material. And so when he finished creating after 6 days and he rested on the seventh, it's like he passed the baton on to us so that we could now create something beautiful and innovative and useful out of the stuff he just created. To be an image bearer of God is to have the ability and the privilege and the stewardship of participating with God in the furthering of creation. And this is vital to understand when considering the topic of vocation, and especially when evaluating what kind of work we ought to be doing. In a talk at Biola University, which is my seminary alma mater, Talbot Theological Seminary is part of that, Professor and author Wayne Grudem gives a great illustration about how man can further God's creative work. And it goes something like this. So if Adam were up here on the stage with me and he grabbed this water bottle, he might say, "Wow, Gene, what is that? I mean, is that water inside of that?" And I said, "Yeah, that's water." He says, "You mean you don't have to like hike down to the river and get water every day?" "No, they're just in these bottles." "Where'd you get it?" "Well, someone made it, Adam." "Well, how?" "Well, God left raw material in the earth and to make stuff like this, and he gave us the ingenuity to extract it and to fabricate it, and every country in the world has these bottles today. Incredible. And then he might say, "Well, what about those? I mean, what are those?" "Those are lights." He goes, "Well, I mean, how do those work? Are those made out of stars?" "No, they're not made out of stars. They're made out of the same stuff that we get from the earth, and we've learned how to tap into an energy source to keep them lit." Wow. Now think about something, okay? Think about what the world looked like to Adam right after God was finishing creating. Just think about what he looked out on. Think about all the beauty. But also think about what wasn't there. There's no buildings, no cities, no freeways, no technological advancements, no espresso machines. Now think about what the world looks like today. That's Shanghai, in case you're curious. We've really furthered what God originally created, haven't we? Think about it. Just think about all all that exists that did not exist. It was there in stuff, in raw material. But through our ingenuity and our creativity and our intellect, we have built an incredible world. But has it changed for the better? Well, yeah, in many ways it has, of course. I mean, we have beautiful cities with diverse cultures and breathtaking architecture and prestigious academic institutions that help further education and knowledge. And we have amazing technological and health advancements, and we have great tacos. Who cares about all that other stuff? We got great tacos. But has it also changed for the worse? Well, yes, in many ways as well. People abuse their power. There's corruption, there's wars, and there's violence, and there's racial bias, and there's inequality, and there's injustice. And the only question to answer in the context of this talk is, will your work be on the side of better, or will it be on the side of worse? It's really that simple. And if you're working merely to survive, then you're already on the side of worse by default. God left furthering creation in our hands, and to be passive in that pursuit is to give worse a greater platform to expand. Does that make sense? This is why, it seems silly, but I recently changed my vocation identity, my vocation title. A few weeks I told you, to human flourishing activist. I just want to keep reminding myself why I'm here. Pastor doesn't quite do it for me. Because whatever I do, I want to make sure that I'm on the side of better. And I want to leave behind a common good legacy that I can be proud of. And I hope you're all joining me and us together in that pursuit. Okay, here's how I want to end. Where are we at? Oh, we got all kinds of time. This is great. You're in my hands. I'm gonna put up a list of job classifications, pretty extensive lists, okay? And I'm gonna read through them one at a time. And as I read through them, when you hear or see one that fits your current job, stand up, okay? I forgot, pardon me, students, I forgot to put students on this list. So I'm going to start with students, all right? So students. Any students here, stand up. That's hard work, by the way, so I'm acknowledging that. Management, business and financial, legal, education, computer and mathematical, healthcare. I want to watch this group. Food. No, everybody keep standing. I want you to keep standing. If I've read your job title, I just wanted to see who's in the food business, because that's my love language. Arts, entertainment, and media. Personal care. Homemaker. Architecture and engineering. Administration. Construction. Community and social work. Production. Transportation. Life, physical, and social science. Military. Clergy, including any kind of ministry. Building and ground maintenance. Nonprofits, NGO work. Home care. Farm, fishing, and forestry. Athletics, like a personal trainer or you're a competitor. Childcare. Protective services like police and firemen. Sales. Utilities. Government. General labor. Entrepreneur. Travel. Pet care. Philanthropy. Activism. Nutrition. emergency services, and marketing. You are all up early in the game. Hopefully I got most of these. All of this, look at this list. All of these job classifications are able to further the common good. All of them. Notice I did not include things like terrorist, serial killer, con artist. Whatever work you end up in needs to have a high moral and ethical foundation. All of these have the potential of ending up into the worst category if you don't have that. And if you can't see how your current job furthers the common good, then you might consider making a change in your life. This is what I did 35 years ago. It was so hard. I was making a lot of money. I'm still not making as much as I made 35 years ago. I've been on the path of downward mobility ever since. Don't feel sorry for me. Cornerstone pays all of our staff well. But I felt like I was free-falling for a while with no net. But I got to tell you, I love what I'm doing. I'm totally satisfied by what I'm doing. If God were to take me home right now, I feel like I've got a great legacy of common good to leave behind me. Don't be afraid. Don't let the survival instincts get in the way of doing something significant in this life. So here, this is what I want to do, and then we're gonna worship. I'd like you to, for just a second, to imagine the kind of world you'd like to see, okay? Can you do that in your mind? What would it be like? Peaceful? Equality? What are those things that you'd like to see this world be? I could have done this right at the beginning and just closed in prayer. Here is vocation in a nutshell, okay? Whatever you're imagining right now, go out and make it become a reality. That's vocation. You can do it. We can do it together. We have a stewardship before God to take the stuff that He left here on this earth and use it for good. So we have a handout here on across the stage, just a little resource on this topic. If you want to take it home, feel free to grab one and do that. Let's just stand before we worship. You repeat after me. We always like, when somebody does the Lord's Prayer, they usually do it together. I want you just to repeat it after me in the same passion that I say it to you, okay? Our Father in heaven, Abba, sacred, holy is your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Below the sun as it is above the sun. Let us worry only about today. So just give us what we need for today. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Please lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power